Sean, what you got to say?
Greetings, Edgerenka. The Local Telecommunications Regulatory Commission, the TRC, they have been accused by the indigenous telecoms provider, CCT, of denying them the right to participate in the Spectrum Award process. Now, on October 5th, CCT said that it actually confirmed that it had filed claims in the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court against the TRC for denying them the right to participate in the process. And one of the things that I recognized from early on October 2nd, when I heard that CCT and TRC were in court, was a release on their website, the TRC's website. And basically, it is still there, and it's quite simple. It identified the two local providers that have applied for participation in the spectrum process. Now, we'll go into the spectrum aspect of things a little bit, but the two companies identified were Lime and Digicel, and the CCT was not listed. It is not listed even now on that particular website in that press release. So basically, according to the TRC, CCT has not applied to participate in the Spectrum Award process. But CCT is saying that is not the case. They actually applied, and they were asked by the TRC to meet certain requirements. One of them was to vacate or to reduce by some 25% the spectrum that they currently use. So basically, CCT was asked to lower the strength of your service. Maybe it would not be as fast as it is now, maybe not as competitive as it is now, I'm not sure. And by doing so by 25%, then apparently, based on how I read into this, they would be at a point where TRC figures it's at a level for all parties to participate in the process.
Well, that's quite an interesting development, Sean. And I'm not quite sure I understand what that situation really is. But
yes.
what is disturbing to me is that it seems that CCT, a locally owned company, continues to have an adversarial relationship with the regulatory agency of the Virgin Islands.
Although the CEO, Mr. Advert Penn, says they don't have one and they don't want one, but it does appear that way.
Yes, with a lot of actions. I mean, they were fined a few months back for
in 2014.
Yes,
$50,000 for unauthorized use of the spectrum.
We had the other companies engaging on unfair competition and unfair pricing practices. They seem to have gotten off with relatively unscathed. And we seem to continue to have problems with this local company. So that's quite interesting to me. And I'd like to know what the Minister of Communications and Works has to say about this, because he is the representative for the territory and the minister in charge.
Yes.
And it seems to me that he should be looking out for the interests of the local company to make sure that they don't receive any unfair treatment on behalf of the TRC. Now, people will say the TRC is a statutory body.
Right, so it's independent, an autonomous body.
It's a quasi-autonomous body. The minister appoints the board, and he appoints the chairman. It's easy enough for him to fire the whole board and restructure the board so that it carries out the policies of the government.
Yes.
And so it's not that the minister is powerless. And so certainly I'm looking forward in the days ahead to see how this is going to develop, what the court is going to say, and what the government is going to do to make sure that the local company stays viable. I personally view this as a national security interest, that telecommunication is the bloodline of business in the territory, and it is important that a major part of that structure and that asset is locally owned, because when other people decide to leave, or whatever they decide to do, shut down, or whatever grievance they may have, certainly it puts us in a position where we have our own.
You have the local provider.
We have the local provider,
You
and
reduce the chances of having a monopoly situation.
well, we reduce
which affects the prices.
we reduce the possibility of our business being interrupted.
Fair enough. That's right.
And the bread and butter taken out of our mouth.
Telecommunications goes very far.
That's right. So
Yes.
I'm looking to see on a personal level
Yes.
how this is going to develop.
Well, it's quite interesting because the chief executive officer of the TRC, Mr. Malone, I called him to get his take on the issue, but he told me he was out of the country and he would make some time when he returns to have a conversation with me so I can better understand the things from their perspective. Because apart from what they said in the press release, by stating Digicel and Lime as the only two companies, Cable and Wireless / Lime, to have applied for participation in the spectrum, I couldn't understand why they didn't say that that CCT had applied, but they asked of them to meet certain requirements, and therefore they didn't meet those requirements, so they are no longer for the moment they're not a part of the process. I think they should have really made that distinction in their press release as well, because the impression one gets is that that CCT never applied.
Yeah.
So now they're in court battling over this.
It's a perfect relationship tonight on Spotlight, where we're talking about patriotism and,
Yes.
and culture, and how patriotism relates to nationalism.
Yes.
And how important it is for our agencies and our institutions to make sure that our national security assets are secure, and that we are able to thrive and function without being subject to the control of foreign interests. And that's an important philosophical discussion that needs to take place.
Well, to give a simple look at the spectrum aspect of things, in 2014, the TRC said, that is the CEO, Mr. Malone, Guy Lester Malone, said the TRC is now pressing on with the process of allocating frequencies that will allow the launch of new and innovative mobile service in the Virgin Islands, such as 4G LTE. The TRC, he said, is preparing to allocate 700 megahertz spectrum in an award process, and after that process, licenses will be granted. So it's pretty much like you give a radio station license to operate on a particular frequency, and that frequency takes the signals, the signal throughout the Virgin Islands and beyond, and so forth. It's quite similar, and of course we know that CCT they were testing their new equipment and so forth in 2014, and shortly after we heard in May or so that they were being fined some $50,000 for unauthorized use of that spectrum. So now here they are in court, and we're going to see what comes of that situation.
And certainly it'll be interesting to find out what is in fact the award process.
Yes.
What are the criteria?
Yes.
And how that decision is going to be made.
Precisely.
That's important information. Perhaps you could get that in the news this week.
Well, keep your hopes up, because we were promised a discussion. We'll see what comes out of that. And on the flip side, a much more controversial issue. The posting of pornographic material on the internet continues unabated, it seems. In fact, just recently we learned that charges were brought against a gentleman who once served in the Virgin Islands Police Force, and we are told that he was apparently involved in some pornographic acts, and that activity was seen on video, and it was circulated via WhatsApp and other internet sources. The police apparently got their hands on that video, and the gentleman was charged and arrested. I'm not sure where he is now. I know he has not appeared in court as yet. The nature of the charge, though, is quite interesting, because the police said that yes, he's charged, and basically they indicated that he was charged with one count of causing prostitution of a woman in relation to the matter that we are speaking of, that is performing that pornographic act. And it's quite interesting because I'm not sure if precedent has been set. I'm not sure if anyone has ever been charged for this kind of activity here in the territory or in the Eastern Caribbean for that matter, because we are now seeing the proliferation of internet and access to internet and the use of mobile phones to record sexual activities and so on. And even while this gentleman was charged just days ago, today I learned that there are other videos, new videos circulating of other people who have been engaging or who engaged in similar acts and other types of sexual activities, and they were recorded, and those are now being circulated as well.
Well, there's a couple of issues. One is whether the performance of the sexual act was for compensation,
Right.
which would account for the prostitution charge.
Yes.
So obviously the police must have some information regarding whether the person was it was a deal, a sale.
Right, because this video, looking at the video, the incident took place in what appears to be a store.
Right. So
Yes.
was there a quid pro quo? There was
Yes.
compensation for a service provided, which would certainly come the prostitution charge would certainly come out of that situation.
Right.
The other issue is the age of the the
Yes,
person.
yes, age of the person.
Yeah, whether the young lady was of age of consent.
Yes, is she
which,
a minor?
right, which then
Yes.
would bring a charge of statutory rape.
Yes.
Yes, statutory rape.
It's really
So
going.
yeah, so but we haven't heard anything about that charge, about that possibility.
No.
We've just heard about the prostitution
Yes.
charge. So that would lead you to believe that the person may have been over the age of consent.
Right.
Because certainly that charge
Police would have reviewed the tapes.
that charge should have been
Yes.
accompanying the other charge.
Yes.
But I'm hoping, and we have to applaud the police
Yes.
for the swift action that was taken in this regard.
I agree.
And hopefully it may serve as a deterrent to others who want to engage in this type of behavior. But there's of course, Sean, there's a wider community issue.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, there's a wider social
these
issue.
Things are morally
Yeah.
degrading.
Yeah.
And of course, they're socially debilitating to the society.
Yeah, and where are we as adults in the country behaving in this manner?
Yes.
And what
kind of examples are we setting?
and
Yes.
what do we attribute this type of behavior to? Because the Virgin Islands I grew up in, this stuff is all new. It's all new to me. Now you could say that, well, when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet, we didn't
Right.
have the
Yes.
electronic
I mean,
devices.
who knows? Maybe there were
and so on.
incidents that were never recorded because they didn't have the devices
right,
then.
could be,
Yes. But when we know that these things have legal implications, and we know that they are criminal acts, those guidelines alone should let us know that we shouldn't engage in those behaviors, because when they go on the internet, they can't be removed. They're on the internet.
and you have persons' characters being
Yes.
destroyed. And the society as a whole is, to me, under attack. Because what does it say about us?
Yes.
I know we might think, well, okay, I don't have a video on there, and I'm not engaged in this kind of behavior, but it's a reflection on me as an individual, as a Virgin Islander. People in I used to take on, all of the aspects of a Virgin Islander. So if something happens to a Virgin Islander, it's almost as if it's happened to me.
Yes.
And so I'm ashamed of the action that
Yes.
the acts
Yes.
that all my brothers and sisters are
It's a
carrying
reflection
out.
of the entire society.
It's a reflection of the entire
Yes.
society.
And I can tell you personally, in the case of the gentleman who was charged, because he is a Vincentian national, many people have been throwing out the nuances of the relationship to Vincentians and questioning, every Vincentian, whether jovially or in a very serious manner. So it really paints a bad picture, not just on the Virgin Islands. It goes all the way back to St. Vincent where he originates, and it also spans the entire Caribbean because someone outside the region sees this kind of thing and would ask themselves, what's going on down there in the Caribbean?
What kind
Exactly.
of people? What kind of people
Yes.
these are? And that's
And then from a human rights and a children's rights perspective and so on, there too, from a UN perspective, it just reflects bad on the entire region.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So these are things that we have to start paying attention to, and of course, then what is the solution? What do we need to be doing to make sure that our young people, engage in behavior that is
Yes.
that's becoming of supposedly a Christian society, as we like to say. And so there's a whole lot of other issues I think we need to start looking at and paying attention to in the community. We abhor the whole notion of censorship,
Yes.
and we don't want to seem as though we want to limit
Right.
freedom of press and freedom of expression. But how far are we going to allow these things to go to have the type of impact that they're going to have on our young people, our children, and the society as a whole? So
But I certainly think that behaviors like what we just saw, these circulating of pornographic materials via internet sources, are forms of cybercrimes. And when you look at the BVI Criminal Code of 2007, there is the criminal libel, there is a definition of what is defamatory, and there are other scenes such as obscene publications and so forth, unlawful publication of computer data and child pornography and so forth. So it will be interesting to see how this case pans out.
Well, Sean, there's some interesting topics there. We had interesting stories making news this week, and hopefully, when the details come out this weekend, we'll get we'll shed some more light on the subject. So, thanks for those reports.